Welcome, everyone. And this is our next panel discussion. And it's Lineage Strategy, Approaches and Expected Gaps, advocated by Big ID. And I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Christopher Glover, the Field CTO with Big ID. Welcome, Christopher, and over to you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm happy to be here today. Let me go ahead and advance the slides here. In the way of self-introduction, I'm not going to read through this. You can go to my LinkedIn and you'll see much of the same there. What I would like to say today is I was very honored to be a member of the CDMC subcommittee on Lineage. I was lucky enough to get paired up with a couple of people from IBM, Beth Ackerman and Stephen Jones, and we were responsible for really the subsection of Lineage on automated multi-environment discovery of Lineage. So that's going to be the main part of my talk today, is really about Lineage, the way and options you have for automating that. Just a quick call out to the CDMC. I'm sure you've all been seeing this today, and I'm sure you've seen the announcements on it. But Lineage is one of the 14 controls of the capabilities that you have in CDMC, and we'll be talking about that one that's over there, and it looks like it's number 13 on this diagram. I want to remind you that you can ask questions anywhere along the way here. We will take some questions perhaps in the session if they're pertinent to what I'm talking about and it makes sense to clarify something. Otherwise, I'll save some time at the end to answer questions, but please go ahead and fire off those questions, put them where we can see them, and we'll try to get them to them in the end. So I'm going to give an example of Lineage, and I'm going to use my own personal lineage. How did I get here today? Well, I am in Seattle, Washington, which is on the west coast of the United States. It's incredibly early here, and despite the movie Sleepless in Seattle, we are not sleepless in Seattle, and we are definitely asleep at this time of the morning. But I'm happy to be here. I got here by stumbling down the hall, getting some coffee, and sitting in my home office. But if I ask a broader question on Lineage, like how did I actually get here? How did I actually get here on Earth? There's a story to tell there. So if I look at my personal lineage, and this is not my complete lineage, my family's Catholic, it would take like an entire slide deck and more to go through my entire lineage. But the simplified version of this is, hey, there's me, there's my mom and my dad, and then there are my relatives. And if and this is the story growing up, there was Grandpa John, Grandma Mary, and Great Uncle Paul. And if I wanted to know more about that, there were certainly tools available to me to go out and find out more. Certainly I could ask family members about my genealogy. But today there's even more advanced tools. I can go to sites like ancestry.com to be able to figure out, what it knows about my family. And I might be able to trace it back even further. In my family, or in the US, many immigrants came through Ellis Island. And Ellis Island is an island in the harbor of New York where about 12 million people immigrated to the US. And if I trace my family back, I'd actually find that as part of my lineage. It's Kilkenny family and the O'Fallon family. They came to Ellis Island. They came from Ireland. And if I wanted to search that even further back, I could go back to Ireland. I could go to church records. Thankfully, I don't have to go to Ireland to do that, though it would be great to go drink a bunch of beer and visit all the churches, perhaps not in that order. But much of this records are online today, and there are tools that help me to fill out this lineage and really get to the gaps in my lineage and be able to look at the entire story of my lineage. Now, the story doesn't end there. There's absolutely more technology that I could apply to this. If I wanted to take it even further, I could look at DNA. And a lot of companies are now allowing you to get your DNA, upload your DNA, share it with websites out there. And what could go wrong with that? But people are doing it. And if you look at my lineage online, and some of my family have shared their DNA, you'd find this interesting thing that, well, Great Uncle Paul had a few relationships that maybe the church wouldn't have condoned. And there are some relations to other people, or there are other people in my lineage that money in the family didn't really know about. But thanks to technology today, we have an extended part of my lineage. But what I'm trying to point out here, that there are tools that help you fill in these gaps. And it's really the automation there that made this a lot easier than me having to go to Europe, go to Ireland, look in the churches, have a very detailed conversation with great uncle Paul. So a little bit about approaches to lineage. Now, there's really two main approaches. There is a manual approach, and it's not really applicable for many these days. But if you're a very small environment and there are a limited number of SMEs there that are needed to fill out and document that lineage, if the velocity of change in your environment is very low, or if the regulation in your industry is low, it can still be done manually. But this is really not that applicable. And I suspect that most people who are here listening to me today are not looking for the manual approach. So we'll talk and spend most of our time today talking about the automated approach to lineage. So part of what started this look at the CDMC is that there's this great opportunity with the cloud to leverage automation. And Lineage is no different than the other capabilities you have. Cloud is really purpose-built. Most of what you see in the cloud and the processes that are there are automated. The metadata is very mature in the collection of technical, business, and operational metadata. And Lineage, which is really a subset of your operational metadata, is readily available in the cloud. And so it's been a great opportunity to look at the cloud and how the cloud can help you to automate many of the functions of data management, and Lineage included. Where it's appropriate to use automation is when it's going to take longer than a few months. I was going to talk about size, but size is relative for everyone. You know, if you're a very small company and you have 15 systems, that could be large for you. But really, a great measure is if it would take you longer than a few months to document your lineage manually, then you're probably looking for opportunities to automate. Documenting your lineage once is easy. Keeping it up to date is almost near impossible. So the second thing I would say is that if the maintaining of it requires more than the resources that you have budgeted to maintain lineage, it's another indicator that you're looking for opportunities to automate. Obviously, if velocity of change is high, in one of my roles, I led enterprise data architecture for a fairly large company, tens of thousands of systems. And, one of the first things I did in that role was to go out and hire a consulting company, come in and document the data and the data lineage and the data flows and the environment technologies that we had. And, 3 months and $300,000 later, I had a great deck benchmarking me against all my peers in the industry, and a fantastic map on my wall of the entire data environment, about 2.5 meters wide by 1.5 meters high. I could see everything, and it was fantastic. Very proud of it. Well worth the money. But about 2 days later, after the final readout from the consulting company and the poster going up on my wall, somebody came in and they took out a pen and they started crossing things out on this. And in my head, I'm like, you're writing on my $250,000 diagram of the entire data management organization. That was my inside voice, and I didn't say that out loud. But he was right. I mean, he was crossing out systems that had been deprecated in the month before, processes or new processes of aggregation that we had in the environment. So it's very hard to keep these things up to date, particularly if you're in a high, velocity rate of, if you have a rate of change and high velocity of change in your environment. Regulatory compliance is another area. I think many of the people who are starting to adopt CDMC are in the financial industry, and certainly there's a high level of regulation in that industry, and it's important to be able to track your lineage, or even a requirement sometimes. All of these are going to make you start to look for automation as a solution to lineage. So quick, I would call this the low bar for Lineage. If you're looking to automate Lineage, here are the items that I would call like your minimum standards for this. It needs to automatically identify and document the existing data sources and processes in your environment. That is the low bar for this. It absolutely should be able to automate that. Not 100%, but it should get you 70, 80% along the way on documenting your lineage. It needs to support discovery across hybrid and multi-cloud environments. There's a statistic that I've seen thrown around that 93% of companies use one or more cloud providers. And at first that seems really high, but if you think about it, if you're using AWS and you're using Office 365 in the cloud, or using G Suite from Google, I mean, you're already there with two different cloud environments. Throw in things like Salesforce and other environments, you're easily multi-cloud. Most of us are. It needs to support discovery across geographies. So you need to look at your geographies. It's a requirement for many of the regulations that are out there. Being able to trace your lineage across availability zones is important. And the fourth thing I would say is look for ML, machine learning, or AI, artificial intelligence, to augment your discovery and auditability. I would call these like your 4 minimum bars if you're starting to look for modern lineage tools and capabilities, or if you're developing them yourself. So some common causes for what causes gaps in lineage. And I'm going to spend some time and focus on these gaps now. Legacy technology is often a reason for having gaps in your lineage, and expect this. No company has all brand new technology unless you opened your doors yesterday. I constantly get requests from customers that I talk to about, can you read our VSAM files? Can you find out what's in them? We've got a tandem database. I mean, that database has probably been deprecated or de-supported for 10, 15 years, but somehow a company's managed to keep that thing standing up and running. Cobalt, I worked on Y2K problems in 1999. Never thought I'd see another line of Cobalt, but it's still out there. So legacy technologies are going to be a source of gaps in your lineage. If you are aligned with a certain vendor, what you're going to see is that they will have lineage tools that help you to document the lineage for their tool set. And if you have, like most of us, multiple vendors that are supporting your technology, those lineage tools will help you less with the other technologies in your environment. So this is going to be another source. Like if you're relying on your vendor's tools for your lineage, it's going to be very good with the tool set they provide. But it's probably going to be less effective against other tools in your environment. Vendor ecosystems. We've been talking about cloud here. It's the same story for cloud. Inside of the cloud, there's a lot of automation around lineage. In fact, it's very mature and it's very good compared to other environments that you may develop on-prem or build on-prem. But again, it's going to be very effective against the tool sets and tools and systems and technologies that they provide, but it's going to be less effective about reaching outside of the cloud into your on-prem environment, across clouds to other clouds. So you're going to have to rely on something to aggregate that together. So look for this in your lineage tools, or look for the capability to start to aggregate that lineage and pull it together from multi-cloud environments and on-prem. And lastly, most companies have some sort of homegrown application or some development that you've done internally, and it makes sense. It's lightweight, it's purpose-built, it's lower cost for you than buying a commercial piece of software. But often there's a lot of corners cut when you develop your own software, and it may not have all the information that you need to support lineage. It may not have the logging, or the logging may not support operational metadata that you would need to track lineage. It may not have a mature API that allows you to extract that. So this is another source of gaps in your lineage, is those internal applications that you have. So a little bit about what to expect to kind of overcome these gaps in modern data lineage. One, expect coverage. No vendor is going to be able to support 100% of your technologies. So make a list, ask, what technology, make a list of your technologies, make a list of your versions. And if you're searching for software out there to support your lineage, ask the vendor what they support and how much should that cover. If they say cover 100%, they're probably not telling the truth, and you might want to consider a different vendor. In that set, there's going to be a set of gaps. Ask the vendor how they can overcome these gaps. What technologies that they have to help you overcome these gaps in the lineage that you're going to have, because they don't support every bit of technology in your environment. Look for intelligence in the products, or build intelligence into the products that you have. ML, AI, most vendors are going to promise this or have some story around that. Be suspicious of this. Ask a lot of questions about ML. Machine learning is, an algorithm that's based on a training set that produced that algorithm. Most of those training sets are not going to be produced and built against your data, but were pre-computed and built against a training set somewhere else. Ask about those training sets. A great example is a lot of companies, particularly in the detection space, would use an algorithm to detect addresses. If that training set was a bunch of addresses that were in the US, it's not going to be very effective against detecting addresses in Europe. So ask about ML and AI. Advanced rule-based or statistical algorithms are also very strong at being able to support lineage. So a couple examples about how to infer, the gaps in lineage. You can deduce a lot from just looking at tables. If I sit you down and I put you in front of, give you two tables from two different databases, and I asked you to study them and look at them, you might start off with something as simple as, hey, this one is labeled customer and this one description is cust. It looks like there's the same information in there. Probably these two things are sourced from the same place, or one came from the other. This level of deduction as a human being would take you several minutes. Computers are going to do that in seconds or less to be able to do that. You can infer directionality. So if you were looking at that same set of data from two tables and you were able to see that, hey, over here, I've got a bunch of messy addresses, and over here, I've got a bunch of cleaned up addresses. Well, you could really infer that there's some kind of cleansing process happening in between these two tables, and that perhaps the direction is that messy to cleaned up address, and that there's some process in here. Even though you may not have the tool in Lineage to actually detect that process that's in between, you can start to infer it, and Lineage tools are starting to infer those gaps. Last one I'll talk about is reverse engineering the transformation logic. Yes, it's possible to guess what that logic might have been. If you've got if those same two tables that I put in front of you, one of them was a table that, if one of those tables was a list of transactions, and you group those transactions together and you sum them up, and you notice the sums by those groupings were actually the same as the sums in this other table, you can see that maybe you've got a detailed table over here and a summary table over here that makes some reporting more effective. These are simple examples, but machines are able to do this type of inferred lineage. Look for this type of intelligence in lineage tools, or if you're developing your own lineage tools, start to apply this type of intelligence. It's going to make lineage a lot more complete and a lot easier to use. And the last thing I would say is look for integration with the other tools in your environment, or the other data management functions in your environment. Stewardship is very important. We've talked a lot about how you can automatically discover lineage. Being able to, I still think that your goal is going to be around the 70 to 80% range of using machines to detect and describe your lineage or document your lineage. Stewards are going to be the ones that are going to validate that the machines were correct in their assumptions and their inferences. And they're also going to fill in those gaps, being the SMEs or talking to SMEs in the environment to fill in the rest of the gaps of your lineage. So lineage should absolutely be plugged into your stewardship process. Quality is another piece of this. And I would say quality of the data and the qualities of your data along the lineage pipeline are going to be important. It should plug into your catalog. So another one of the controls or one of the capabilities of the CDMC is cataloging. It's 2.1. And your lineage should plug into your catalog as well. So if you have a catalog of all the data and all the objects in your environment, you should be able to look at that object and instantly be able to see what the lineage of that object is. So look for a way to integrate your lineage into your catalog, or look for tools that do that. It should plug into other areas of compliance like privacy, security. A great privacy example is ROPA, or record of processing activity. Lineage really helps you to define, or help somebody from the privacy office to develop and create that record of processing. And so these are the different things that I think you should be looking for in lineage tools. And I am now going to open it up for questions.
Great.
I'm not seeing.
Hey, Christopher, it's Mike. So I do have a nice audience question for you, and then we'll turn it back to you to tell us a little more about Big ID. So here's the question. How do you see most companies getting started with data lineage? And another add-on to that, what's the business case? Because very few things, if any, get approved today without a solid business case. So what do you start with first? How do you get a business case through the executive gauntlet of approvals?
I say, I see lineage started small. Like trying to take on lineage for your entire organization in one step is going to be a Sisyphean task. It's going to be hard to get approval for that budget. It's going to be difficult to actually get started and make any appreciable progress on it that people can see. So what I see for lineage is it starts small, and it starts in, say, a department or a domain's worth of data that people are starting to use tools for lineage. The typical cases that I see for lineage, obviously compliance is one of them, privacy is one of them, record of processing is a great example in there. So you're going to see support from the privacy office and being able to develop that lineage for all of the sensitive data in the environment. Same thing goes from security. Operationally and traditionally, lineage is used for impact analysis, being able to determine that, hey, I'm going to make a change, or developers are going to make a change somewhere upstream of data. And being able to see all the impacts down the lineage to the end and what's possibly going to happen to this change that I'm making today is important. And the third case I see often is really the lineage or provenance of the data. There's a lot of debate about those two terms, and I'm not going to get into it here, but as an analyst, being able to look at my lineage and say, where did this data come from? Where, if the data is looking a little bit strange to me today, what are the processes that were involved in producing this data? Same thing for the data science side. Being able to determine where this data came from is important. I think from a compliance perspective, looking at lineage is important, and maybe that's where the definition changes to provenance. Is I need to be able to prove in a lot of cases how I developed a metric or how I made a decision for a customer. And this is where understanding the entire lineage of that data and all of the things that went into producing that metric, all the places and processes that touch that data along the lineage, what was the source of that lineage, is very important to a lot of compliance obligations that we have today.
So, Christopher, I've heard if you want to talk lineage, set your clock. It's going to go for a while. It is a very, very big topic, a lot of sophistication, but you really helped the audience today better understand it. Can you share with us just in a minute or so the Big ID and where you help and how people can get in touch with you all?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so Big ID is a data intelligence platform. It enables organizations to know their enterprise data. Customers who use Big ID, they use it to proactively discover, manage, protect, and get more value from their regulated, sensitive, and personal data. What you see on the screen here is really the platform. The way we approach data and data management and in areas like Lineage is we're really looking to not recreate these technologies in the past and the same lineage that you had, but really apply a lot of intelligence to it. We already have capabilities in Lineage. You're going to see more of a Lineage story from Big ID that's coming out in the latter part of this year. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us at on the web at bigid.com/contact, or you can email us directly, or you can look me up on LinkedIn and message me, and I'm happy to talk to you or get you engaged with the right people at Big ID.
So Christopher, thank you for these insights, and certainly I can give a big shout out to Big ID that you, Peggy, and your team have been phenomenal contributors throughout the entire life cycle over the last 18 months of building out CDMC. And no doubt you're on the front line of helping customers solve these issues with your solutions. So we encourage people to reach out to you. So thank you very much. And for our audience, you can see what's up on the screen. We have a short break, like a 10-minute break at this point. So please join us in your local time, which is at 3:25 BST or 4:25 CEST. And for those on the East Coast in the US, 10:25 a.m. We're going to do a council update. I'll be involved in that. And we have an exciting set of announcements around who's winning the raffles for free training courses. And Christopher, once again, thank you very much for an outstanding discussion.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me. And love
we'll see everyone. Check your agenda, take a break, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes on the main stage. Thank you very much, everyone.